Okay, then. Hello to you. Can you hear me? Can you just setting everything? You have the link for the live stream. Can you go on it and tell me if you can hear me, if everything is okay? Okay, then. So, do you have any question or any request? What you want me to do? I can go through the project or answer to specific question, just as you like. Can anybody confirm me? Okay. Okay, so obviously you have heard me. So let's go to the project. I'm going to switch and share my screen. Like that, you will be able to see. First, I will show you how my game is working. And then we will go to the code and check how everything has been done. Okay? So let me share the screen. Okay, so this is my game. As you see, I have the DevTools opened. That's a good habit to have. Each time you begin to debug something, always immediately open the DevTools. There are many very important things which will appear there and which will help you to debug and do everything. For example, for this project, when you first started, you have a blank screen here with nothing which appear. If you open the DevTool, you have errors in the console, and the first thing to do is to check the errors and try to correct them. Like that, you will be able to have something, and it's a good track to start the game. So let's go to see what my game is doing. As you see, I have a score panel with the timer here, the number of life left, just some help, and a model pop-up saying how to play. So you can change the difficulty of the game normally. Let's reload the game. Okay. Oh. Okay, I see. I have something wrong here. What's happening? to work now. Oh. So I can change the character of the game hitting the enter key. And I don't know why the difficulty of the game, I don't remember how it was working. Here it is. And hitting the plus key, I can change the difficulties of the game. When I change the difficulties of the game, I have more enemies. And if I go to the hardest game, I have more enemies, and they are going in both directions. So and then when you start the game, it's pretty easy. It's just like, I think I will die. Okay, I lose 1 life. Okay, and this is the model pop-up showing at the end of the game. I return here in order to change the difficulty if the player wants, and in order to change the player as well if the player wants. Okay, I made it in easy mode. Here I get 1 gem a second, and here it is, the model pop-up when I win. As I told you, you can pause my game and restart it. Okay? So now that you have seen everything which is possible with the game, I will show you what's happening in the code window. I think I need to change the screen I'm sharing, so just a second. Okay. And now let's go to the text editor. Here we are. So normally you see my text editor, it's Visual Code. And here is the code of the game. As you have seen in the game, you have 3 files. The engine files, you have not a lot of things to do in it, but you have a few things to do in it if you want your game to work properly. We will come back to that later. You have the resource file. You have just nothing to do like that. It's just a file to preload everything to be sure that everything renders properly. So this file, I opened it just to show it to you, to remind it to you, but you have nothing to change in it. So here is the game. The way I have approached the problem is, first, I wrote everything with ES6, I go to the game file. First, I do everything with ES6 syntax. So I use a class syntax for objects, and everything is done with ES6 syntax. Okay. The other thing I have done is I've decided to wrap all my game in one object to use the MOC model octopus control design of the software. So everything is done with the MOC, and I have an object for the game. I created it. Then, so the game object, note in the game object, I have a few things which will be used everywhere. If you don't use an object for the complete game, you can do it differently, more classically, I would say. But these things like this dot timer, this dot level, everything which are in fact the state of the game. You will need to have that in global variables. So the timer, the difficulty level, and the color I use to code the difficulty level. And this will be the different state of my game. It can be stopped when I start the game. It can be paused when I hit the escape key to pause the game. It can be won. It can be lost. This will be used to have to check different action when the user hit one key and to handle the keystroke properly, and it will be used as well to display the proper model pop-up. Then I have an array for the different sprites of the different characters I use in the game. Then are the method of the game. The first one, one of the most important one is init game. It's the method which will start the game and set everything ready to go. So I go quickly to it. I go quickly. We will come back to that as this is an important one. Change state is a method which allows to change the state of the game and set it to pause, stopped, running, and everything. Okay. And render is the method which will display the game on the screen. This method uses a function. Will use display pop-up. To make my pop-up, I use the Canva, and this is used to display the model pop-up with the Canva. Okay. This is a method just to display emojis on the Canva. And this is the start menu model pop-up. This method is used to handle the keystroke. We'll come back to that later. This method updates the score. And then I have a class of characters. This will be used this class will be used then to define the player, the enemies, and the gems. The other objects, the other classes will be subclasses of this main one. So this main one have just a few things: the X position, the Y position, the speed of the object, and the sprite with which is used. Okay, and a render method, and that's all. So here is my subclass for the enemy. So I use as well, I have exactly the same thing, and I add a new method, which is update, which will allow the enemy to move on the screen. This is made to check if the enemy is going out of the Canva or not. My test is a bit more complicated because I can have a negative speed. So the negative speed allows the enemy going from the right to the left instead of the left to the right. So I have to check. Where, according to the speed, what I do with the enemy. But this can be a lot more. You can have only one test. If you have only positive speed, you just have to change this to remove this part of the OR condition. This is a subclass for the gem. The gems are exactly the same. The only thing is they have a speed of 0 as they don't move. And if you remember my character class, by default, the speed is set to 0. So I have nothing to do to the speed on the gems. Okay. I just add a few things. I just add the color of the gems because I used 2 different colors, the green gems and the yellow gems. And the render method for the gems. And then we have the class of the characters of the player, which is also a subclass of character. So it uses everything. We have added a few things, which is the width of the player, because this width will be used for the collision detection later. And a few things due to the way I've done the game. My player has 3 lives at the start of the game, and he have no gem at all at the start of the game. And by default, the sprite is the carboy.png sprite. I have an update method. In this update method, I check if a collision arise. Then I check if he is grabbing a gem. We will see later, but they are nearly exactly the same method. The only thing which changes is the dimension of the gems. And according to what happened with check collision and grab gems, I update the score. This is the way the keys are handled when the game is running. So, well, it's very easy. Up, down, and each time there is a test to check if the player is at the border of the canvas, at the border of the game, not to move it and not to let it go out of the game. So here is the grab gem method and the check collision method. We come back later on it in a more detailed way. Then this is the general function. I need, for many times in the game, I need to generate a random number between 2 integers. Okay, and the 2 integers can be between 0 and the maximum I set as a parameter. Okay. Then we are, in fact, it's the main code of the game. I just define a few global variables of the game. So I instantiate my game object with the game class we talked about earlier. I define a player var and an all enemies array. And then an all gems array constructed exactly the same way as the whole enemies. And then I just start the game. So I call init game. We will go back to it to detail what we do in the init game. And we use set interval for the timer. And as you see, my interval is always running as soon as the game has been loaded. And in fact, I just change the timer according to the state of the game. If the game is running, my timer is incrementing. If the state is not running, nothing is done at the end of the interval. So so it don't change. It doesn't change, sorry. And I update the score in order to have the new value of the timer displayed on the screen. And then I set an event on KUp according to the key. So this is nearly exactly the same thing as the one which is provided with the starter code of the project. I've just added a few things. Enter to change the player, escape to pause and resume the game, space to start the game, and plus K to change the level of the game. And then, so I then in this event handler, I call handle input to with the key which has been stroken. So now we go back to init game. Where it is. Here it is. So init game, which is called at the very beginning. These first two arrays are just to simplify the code and have it written more easily later on. These are the Y position, the three Y position possible, the three possible Y position for the enemies according to the size of the enemy string and the size of the game, in fact, of the game canvas. And I do the same with gems positions. Their positions are a bit different because we will see later we have to resize the gems picture because otherwise it's too big. Okay, Isabella, I will answer that just a bit later. I finish with explaining the game, and we will go through the collision detection a bit later. So the gems position are a bit different because the size of the gems is a bit different of the size of the enemies. And at the start, I have two gems, okay? No. Then I generate a random number to instantiate a random number of gems at each game. I define my Y position for the gem and my Y my X position and my Y position, and it's just I just define the variables because I will use them later. So I initiate the timer to 0, and the state of the game has stopped. So the timer, the set interval will run, but nothing will be done as the game is not running. I define my all enemies as an array, my all gems as an array, and I instantiate my player with its initial position and the sprite of the player, which has been selected in the menu. Then I begin to define my enemies. So I initiate the maximum number of bugs to 5, and then according to the level difficulty, I will make different things to instantiate my enemies. If we are on an easy game, the maximum number of bugs will be 3. I change it there, and I define in each time I push in my all enemy arrays a new instantiation of an enemy with a random position, a random X position, and a random Y position. This is why I have my array there to just pick, according to the index, a random row for the enemy. And sorry, I think I made a little mistake. These are the enemies which are going on the reverse direction. So I use a reverse a different sprite to have the bug on correctly displayed. Then, well, I do exactly the same kind of thing for the different level of difficulties. What will change is the number of bugs and the speed, which will be different. With different maximum in order to allow the bugs to go more quickly on the game. Then I do nearly the same with the gems. I push new instantation of the gems. Here is a little trick, because I don't want to have. You see, I first start with an array of positions for the gems, because the trick is I don't want to have 2 gems on the same positions. So all that is done to randomize the array of position, to be sure that my gems won't be at the same position. And then so it's the same randomizing of the array function that it used in the memory card game. Just exactly the same algorithm. And then I push my new gems in my array to have all my gems. I reset the score on the display, and I change the game to running. And I use speed start for each enemies. This is used, well, this is, if the game is running, my enemies have a speed and they move on the screen. If I want to pause the game, or if the game is won or the game is lost, I set the speed of the enemies to 0. Like that, they stop moving on the screen. And the render function of the game, if my game is not running, I have a pop-up to display, and the pop-up to display, if the game is stopped, it's the start menu I have shown you before, okay? And so I call this start menu and this display emoji that we have a bit discussed before to render the model pop-up on the screen. So display emoji is very simple. You see, I pass the state of the game as a parameter, and either it's the wait PNG, the happy PNG when you win, and the sad PNG when you lose. and I draw the image on the Canva. This is to display the start menu. Well, I use the Canva. I encourage you you have a free Canva course on Udacity. Just check for that and go through it. It's very easy to use, and it will help you to make a nice model pop up like I did. Shortly, to trying to explain you, fill text, write text on the canvas. This is the text I want to write, and the position of the text. And so I write I write all my text, and fill style is colors. It's where you choose the color and everything, which will be used. So this is to get. So fill style. See here, I draw a circle on the Canva. Here I define which color the circle will be filled with, and here I fill the circle. Here is the width of the line around the circle and the color of the line. And then again with to choose the player, and here I display using draw image the sprite of the player which is selected. So to handle the K input, if the game is paused, if the K which has been hit is escape, so pause. If the game is running, I pause it. If the game is paused, I make it running. That's it. You see, this property of my game class is very important, because I just have to set this property, and many things will change according to this property. So if the key which is hit is start, if the game is stopped, I make it running. If the game is just lost or won, I change the state to stop, and I call init game again. If the key which has been hit is a player, if the game is stopped, this is to choose the player, so it's the enter key. If the game is stopped, I switch in a circular way in the array to switch the sprite of the player, and same for the level. Okay, and if the game is running, I go to the move method of the player to move my player. Well, this is mainly to deal with the score, which is above the Canva, to display the timer, and to display the number of lives, and to display the number of gems. Okay. Okay, so we have our player. We have everything set up on the game, and if we have hit the space keys, the game is running. So when the game is running, I can move my player, which is there. If the case Isabella, as I just said, in the way I did it, it's I have a property of game which can be a global variable, which is state. And in fact, each time I do something, I change. If the game is not running, I will never call the move method of the player, even if the arrow keys have been hit. Let's go back to handle input is there. You see, I call this. I call the move method of the player only if my state is running. So if my state is not running, if I have changed the state to win, lost, or stopped, or paused, I won't call player move. So you hit the key and nothing happens. But the other keys, I deal with the other keys here. You have to, Isabella, so you have to, somewhere in the game, you have to have a property of the game which tells you how to handle the key. The state of the game will tell you what to do with the last keystroke you have. And if my game is not running, all the keys are available, and I do things according to the state of the game. If the game is running, I pass the key to the move player where I was. Let me go back there. So this one is very simple. In fact, if the key is up, I just decrement the Y position of the player, and I check if the key, this is to test if the player is reaching the river or not. If the player reach the river, I change the state to 1 to be able to display the model and handle the key properly. Down, it's exactly the same. If I am not at the bottom, if my player is not have not reached the bottom limit of the game, I move it down, or I do nothing. My false there may do nothing to the player. Like that, it doesn't go out of the canvas. And same for left. The test is just different, checking the left border of the canvas and the right border of the canvas. So here we are with detection, with the check collision. I didn't use any collision detection from MDN or anything. What I recommend you to write your collision detection is to draw what's happening on a piece of paper. Let me show you. I will switch back to the code, but I will show you. I will go to the camera again to show you what I mean. Open. No. Not the right window, not the right window. Where is the proper window? Google Hangouts, yes. Okay. Okay. What I recommend is you to draw on a piece of paper what will happen. So your player, okay, your player is just a rectangle. We will have to define the size exactly, but your player is just a rectangle. Your enemy is another rectangle. So you have this thing. In that case, you have no collision. If the enemy is there, you have a collision. So Now the problem is how I can know that I am in this case with my player here and my enemy here, or with my player here and my enemy here. This is not very complicated. If I check one corner of my player, okay? I have one corner of my player. If this corner is higher, if the corner with the dot is higher than the corner of the enemy, but the corner plus the height of the enemy, of the player, lower than the, let me start over. You need to use, it's hard to synchronize. So I have now to check with the height and the width of the enemy and the player if there is a part here, if this part here is overlapping or not. Let's go back to the code and I'll show you that. So this is what is done here. I do it for all enemies, of course. So I do it for each enemies one by one. This is the enemy checked. So if it's a method of the player, so this represents the player, and for the enemy, I use enemy checked dot something. So if the X position of my player is inferior to the X position of my enemy plus the width of my enemy. So this means I have my X position, which is smaller than the X position of the enemy and the width of the enemy. And if my X position and plus the width of my player is more than my X position of my enemy, and then I have to do exactly the same kind of test to check regarding to the height of the enemy and the height of the player. So I check the position, the Y position now with the Y position and the enemy and his height, and the Y position plus the height of the player and the Y position of the enemy. So if this is true, then I have a collision. So I put my player back to the start position. I decrement the number of lives by one, and then if the number of lives reach 0, the game is over and the game is lost. By the way, never do like I did. Check with 3 equal and not only 1. it's a lot more safer. Small, not really a mistake, but it's better to do the test with the 3 equal signs than only 2. So once again, I tell you, draw it on a sheet of paper with the 2 rectangles, and it will be a lot more easy to understand. You draw that, and you will see that you are each time you are checking 2 corners. Each part of the test a corner, a different corner, and check if this corner is into the enemy or not into the enemy. If this corner is into the enemy, there is a collision. And the grab gem is exactly the same. The only difference is I have a small. The only difference is I have a small difference of height. Because, as I told you, the gems are smaller than the enemies, and my action is not the same. I don't put the player back to the start position, but I remove the gem of the all gems array because I have collected it. Daniel, you are speaking about the test with 2 and 3 equal signs. I guess that's your question. In that case, there is not much difference. That's not very different. In that case, well, Daniel, in that case, there is not much different. It can be very different when you use objects and things like that in the comparison, because you can have objects which have the same value but which are not the same. So 3 equal will be false, and 2 equal will be true. So, but it's always preferable to do your test with 3 equal signs. Always take this habit. It's a good habit. It was at the beginning of the ND for me, and I did it with 2, but it's always better to use 3 equal signs. As I told you, Daniel, in that case, there are no difference. The test result will be exactly the same. But if you are referencing to objects and this kind of thing, the value the value can be the same, but the 3 equal. But there are 2 different objects, so the 2 equal test will return true, as the 3 equal test will return false. Yes, yes, Isabella, but look how I do it, where it is. I first check if there is a collision. So if there is a collision, I go at the start position, and only after I've checked there is no collision, I check if I can grab a gem. So you won't be, with the way I do it, first checking the collision and then checking if I can grab a gem. I won't grab a gem if a collision occurs. Okay, got it, Isabella? I have 2 different methods. The check collision is for the enemy. The grab gems is for the gems. Here, I first check if there is a collision. If there is a collision, I put my player back at the start position, remove 1 life, and check if I have lost if I have lost or not. So you can't, with the way I do it, you can't grab a gem if a collision occurs. So where was I? Okay. I think I have gone to everything. So if you have question, I can try to answer to one more detailed point. It's not, well, I just see Alexandre comment. No, it's not intimidating at all. It's just the way I do it. I don't remember in the order of the course when we are at P4 if we have already seen. I think yes, the MOV architecture of code. That's just what I did it like that to have really. You see, I have a model, and I've really my variables are completely separate, and there is only one way to change one variable. Let me check something. Let me check something. I want to up. No. Not exactly, Isabella. The state I use here, the state I use here, as can be different for according to the state of the game. In fact, the game can be stopped. When it is stopped, it means that the game is waiting for someone to start it. So in that case, let's go. I'll switch screen again and show you exactly. Okay. Let's share another screen. Okay. I restart my game. Here, my game is a stop state. So in the stop case, oh, sorry, it's hard to pronounce. In the stop state, what I have to do, I have the bugs moving in the background, but it's just like that. And I have to display the model and allow the plus key to change the level, the enter key, the enter key to change the player, and the space key to start the game. When I hit the space key, my state becomes running. And as my state has become running, I don't check anymore. If I hit the enter key, you see nothing happened. If I hit the plus key, nothing happens. The only keys which are allowed now are the arrow key and the escape key to pause the game. When I pause the game, my state of the game becomes paused. So as the game is not running, I stop the timer and I display this model. Then, and the only key allowed will be escape again to resume the game. Okay? Then I go, let's go there. Up, my state is now lost, and I display the lost model. The only key I can hit is space, which it restarts the game, in fact, and it plays my game once again in the stopped mode. If I win, it's exactly the same, but the model is different. That's why I have a different state. Let's go back to the code. So this state thing in my game here will be very important, because each time I do something with the keys, like where it is, like here, no, like here, under input key, you know, let's go back to the bottom of the game. Here, I set my event listener on KUp, and I accept every keys. And then my keys will be managed according to the state of the game. Let's go. You see, if the key is paused, if the key hit is paused, I do something only if the game is running or paused. If the key hit is start, I do something only if the state is stopped or lost or won. Okay, and if the key is one of the players, if the key is player, is enter to change the player, I do something only if the state is paused. If the key is level, I do something only if the game is stopped, once again. And for all the other keys, which are the moving key, I call the player.move method only if the game is running. And then, in the different function, I can do things according to the state of the game. But this has nothing to do with the collision detection. The collision detection is made when the state is running. So I call it only when the state is running. Let's go back to it. I'm going to quickly. Okay. My player is here. So to check the collision, I check the collision at each update of the game. Okay, so it's the engine which calls update. I go to so in the update method, I first do check collisions. Check collisions is for the enemies, and only after I check if I can get a gem. As in my check collisions method, I restart, I put back the player in the start position and remove 1 life to it. I won't grab a gem because then I will call that, but according to the position, as the gem's positions are on the road, he can't grab a gem in that position. So you are sure he won't grab a gem like that. Did you get it, Isabella? If a collision occurs here, my player change position, and it is at the player is at the start position, so the grab gem will do nothing, in fact. One little thing I haven't talked, maybe for some of you, you've seen I use gems and different sprite for the player. When you do that, don't forget to go to Engine and add this sprite here. I see this question very often in Slack. If you don't do that, you will get an error trying to display another as you see, you need to add the picture you use for the different sprite here. Otherwise, you get an error on draw image in the console when you try to use another sprite. So don't forget to do that. This question comes back very, very often in Slack. Why do my ZTX draw image function returns an error in the console? Is most often is because you have forgot to add the address of your the URL of your new sprite you want to use in this part of the engine. So don't forget to do it. It's not well. It's not so complex, Isabella. It's the architecture which is maybe a bit different with by having a class of for the game, but you will need somewhere in however you do it. You will need somewhere to know in which state is your game, because if your game is won, you need to stop the timer. If your game is running, you need to have your timer running. You will have different actions with the keys and many kinds like that. So in any case, you need to have that. You see, I use the state here once again to run the timer. To run the timer, I do a set interval of 1 second, and but I increment the timer only if the game is running. After the live stream, I will post anyway the GitHub address of my project, so you can look to the code more closely and more quietly than in the live stream, and try to better understand everything. As you see, my code is fairly well commented, and it's not very complicated to understand because you have comments everywhere. Well, I think I've gone to most of the code and the game. I don't remember if the timer is request or not. It was request. It is request in the memory game, in the arcade. I don't remember if it's part of the. Yes. For my scoreboard is very well. Exactly, Daniel. I completely agree with you. I really completely agree with you. About well, I wanted to play with the Canva for the model pop-up, so I did. But honestly, for the score, I did it. I did something very simple. I didn't want to bother a lot with that. That you see, I just had the scoreboard hard coded in the index file, creating some div with the timer, the number of lives and the gems. So it's just some divs above the Canva, which makes the scoreboard. I did it very, very, very well. This is not complicated at all. This is just HTML I added to have a scoreboard, a very simple scoreboard. Notice, always good practice, use an alt text. In the project later, you will need. So take the habit right now. Each time you put an image in the HTML, add an alt text, either a descriptive text, either when it's just like that with not a picture, not a photograph, an empty alt text, but use the alt attribute. This is good practice to remember. Okay, Isabella. So you use the Canva to render your scoreboard. What happens when your game is over? You display a pop-up? Because the way to have it still there will depend on what you do at the end of the game. Okay, I see. So very likely, and your message erases the score, I guess. Look, if you do it, I switch screen again to go back to my yeah. I switch screen again to go back to my game. 1 second. Up. You see my pop-up. I don't erase everything. So if you have your score here, for example, and maybe with a smaller pop-up, you still can see it. So so you see how I did this thing? I have my pop-up, but you still can see the game underneath with transparency, and you can reduce this size to not hide your pop-up. Let me show you how I did that. So I switch screen again. Okay, game. Well, no. Let me show you how I do that. Here it is. Here is my pop-up. Okay. So here is my display pop-up. I just add things on the you have the game, you have the Canva with the game on it. You have the game which is displayed, and my pop-up is there. It will be before it. I first display my rectangle. My rectangle is I first display my rectangle. My rectangle is the gray, the dark gray transparent rectangle. Here it is, and I add. This is where I choose the color. So it's a black one with a transparency, and as you see, the game underneath is not erased. You still can see the game underneath. So if you let your score there, if you have your Canva with the score displayed and the game, you draw a new rectangle smaller than the complete Canva, as I do, you will see the score on the top. I'm not sure I explained it very clearly. So if I don't, just let me know. I will try to do it again. Maybe I will make a drawing to try to show you. Okay, I switch to the camera. So Isabella, here, sorry, it's score which is written. I cannot know. I don't know how to write reverse. If you here is your game with the grass. Sorry, the grass, the road, the river, and your score. All that in the Canva. If you draw a small rectangle like I did, a smaller rectangle like I did with transparency, and you write what you want like that, using ZTX, fill, and this kind of thing, your score will still be visible. You just have to set the size of this rectangle for your pop-up smaller than the size of the complete Canva, just like I did here. Let's go back. just like I do here. You know, this is the line where I create my pop-up. I create my pop-up with a rectangle like this one. These are the position of the rectangle. It starts at 20, goes to 80, and then, so doing it like that, your score will remain visible. If your score is there during the game, you just add a rectangle in front of that on the Canva. So if the rectangle is smaller than the Canva, you will see it. You will see the score. It won't be hidden. Daniel, to get the graphic, I don't know. Let me because I was. I don't know what I have done with the link, but if you do a Google search, Daniel, for a video game pictures or video game images or this kind of search, you well, I finished with Daniel. You will find some links. You have plenty of forums of video gamer who design quite a lot of graphics like that. Some of them you can reuse them, and they are on free licenses. Some of them you can't, but there are plenty of forums for video game design where you can find this kind of graphics. The score on the top of screen, for me, I don't hide it. I don't hide it because it's just here. You have here. You see, I've just created some very basic HTML to display my score. Maybe I misunderstand you, Isabella, but because if you do it like me in the HTML, no problem. It does just like it does on my game. If you put it on the Canva, as you told me, if it's on the top of your Canva, doing a smaller rectangle, you still will be able to see the score when the model appears. Guys, I need a small break. I'll be back in less than 2 minutes. Okay, I'm back. Yes, I think so. I think it's yes, Isabella. I think it's the simplest way to add the score, just like I did. You see, there are just a few divs with with the score, and that's all. And then on the game, and then in the code for the game to update the score. Let's go back to that. To update the score, you see, I just do a few get element by ID. For the part I need to update the lives, the gems, and the time. This is normally you should have done exactly the same kind of things in the memory game, updating your score in the memory game. Any other questions? I see that Isabella is writing something. It's okay. You know, I'm here until 7 o'clock, so no problem at all. So if you have, I'm here until 7 o'clock. So if you have any question, do not hesitate. It's a perfect moment to do it. If I can help, I will be pleased to do it. If you want to check the code more quietly and having the time to read it quietly without me scrolling very quickly, here is the GitHub link where you can find my code. So if you need to go back to that and check back things, do not hesitate. Just don't do copy and paste, because your reviewer won't be happy if you just copy and paste things. But you can check how I do things and adapt them to the way you think you have to do things. And you have normally the documentation is yes, you have a quite extensive README file explaining how it works and the code with plenty of comments in it. Any other questions? just a question for you. Did you remember to fill the form for Udacity, because they try to do some tracking on how helpful it is and everything. So please don't forget to fill the form. The link is somewhere here. Here is the form. I give you the link. Here it is. Don't forget to fill this form for Udacity. Welcome, Sarah. We have plenty of time. Don't worry. We are up until 7 o'clock. So we have plenty of time to start the game. Okay. So Sarah, can you confirm have you started the live stream, and can you hear me? You can't. Oh, you can't get any video. So, but you can't get video. It's a shame, because with the video or without the video, Sarah? Oh, weird, because obviously everybody was able to get it, so you can hear me. I don't know. It might be from your side. Well, where? Oh, okay. You can get the video, the game Canva. Okay, so when you load your project, when you load the index file, open the console, and when you open the console, I will try to let me do something. I will try to simulate the error that you probably have. up. When you well, no, it will be too complicated. If you you load index.html and you open the DevTools. If you look in the console, you very likely have an error. Can you do that now and check what's in there? In fact, at the beginning, you need to do something. You have the objects, you have the classes and the object created in the starter code, but no, in the code, no objects have been instantiated. So you need to do that with the enemies, if I remember well. The first thing you need to do is to create your all enemies array. Until you haven't do that, you won't see anything on the screen. And to check what you need to do, you need to open the DevTools and check at the error you have in the console. Let me try to get the starter code again. Here it is. Up, home. Where is this project? No. Memory game. Orange, yes. Field of testing, no. Okay. Okay. Where is the start? I'm trying to get the starter code. Okay, I got it. Okay, here I am. So you see, I just downloaded the starter code, Sarah, and when I load index.html, I have nothing on the screen. If I open the DevTools, you see I have an error here in the console. All enemies is not defined. So the first thing you need to do is to define all enemies. So you need to check what the sorry, I think I'm not with the right screen sharing. Yes, I'm not with the with the right screen sharing. So let's go again. So now you have what happens when you first download the starter code of the project, and you have an empty screen. Here you have an error in the console. You first need to correct that error. To correct that error in your app.js, you must first define all enemies. And all enemies is an array. Let's go back to, let me close a few programs, otherwise I will be in trouble with everything crashing. Let's go back to here it is. So you have a comment. Let's get here. I need to change the screen I share again. So let's do it. So here is the starter code. You know, here you have a comment saying now instantiate your object. You need to create whole enemies. And whole enemies, if you check in the engine, not this one, not this one, but this one, if you check the engines, you have here one function which is looking for whole enemies. And whole enemies with the for each method, so whole enemies must be an array of objects. So you need to create an array of a few enemies objects. That's the first thing you need to do. This is what I do here in my init game method. Where it is? No. Here it is. The first thing I do, I create my array and I instantiate my player, and then here I push new enemy each time in my array, as many enemies I need in my game. If you create your whole enemies array like that, you will begin to see the canvas. Then you have to make the enemies move and everything like that. Okay, did you get it? You're welcome, Sarah. If you need any help, I'm still online until 7 o'clock. So do not hesitate to come back and check if you need some more help. Anyone else here with some other questions? I'm still there, and I'm still there until 7 o'clock. So if you have any question, do not hesitate. I can go again through the whole code of my project and show you what I did, or answer to more specific questions. If you have one specific difficulty, just ask, and I try to help you the best as I can. I just turned off the camera because it's a bit oppressive to be under the camera all the time, but I'm still there. So if you shoot a question, I will see it, and I will turn the camera on again, share my screen if needed, and try to do my best to explain anything you need. So I see you are 7 connected to the live stream. Any one of you have a question? Just shoot your question, or if you want me to start over to explain what I did, or whatever, just ask, and I'm here to help you the way you need to. So you just ask, and I will do it. No questions? Sure.
now that React Router is installed, we can import it.
So, no question, everybody? Anybody has any question? Just take the opportunity to ask any question you think can be useful for you. No, no, Valère. Don't be afraid of the code. Just get in it. You know, normally you have learned up to now. You have learned everything which is in my code. Everything you have already learned it. One of the big difference is I just nearly didn't use at all the app.js file they provide with the starter code because it was in ES5 JavaScript. and I wanted to write it in ES6. But there is not a big difference. Normally you have gone through the lessons about ES6 and using class instead of the old way to define classes in JavaScript, and with the function and function.prototype and this kind of things. In fact, ES6 make it more simple, because in ES6 you have not a lot of things to do. You just have the class and the name of your class, then constructor and all the properties of your object, and then you define the method which will be used by your class. That's all. And otherwise, yes, I have added quite a few other things, more than the minimum requested for the project, like using the gems, like being able to pause the game and everything. But the basics is here. The logic you have to understand, to better understand my project, the only logic you have to get is I've wrapped the game in one object. So I manage the game exactly like any object, any class of the any JavaScript class. So instead of having global variables and this kind of things, I have one object, which is the game. Then to define, I use the opportunity given by ES6 JavaScript of having classes and subclass. So I define a class character which will be used for everything which appears on the screen: the enemies, the player, and the gems. And enemy, player, and gem are just subclass of the character class. And if you remember, in JavaScript, you define that just by saying class enemy extends character. So enemies inherits all the property and all the method of character, and I can here do what I want. So with the super, I get back to the default properties of the character class, and I add two more properties: X start, which is the X position of the enemy, and speed start, which is the speed. The default speed for the enemy, and that's it. And then I add one new method, which is not in the character, is update. The update method to be able to update the position of my enemy. Then I define another subclass with a gem. The gem, the only thing, once again, I add one property. The property I had is the color, because I have two colors of gems, so I need to add a color. And I add the render method to this subclass. And then I have another subclass which inherits everything of character, and this class is player. Once again, the same initial parameters, and I add the width, the life, the number of lives, the number of gems, and that's it. In fact, using one main class and subclasses like that, it's just because I'm lazy. It just avoid me to rewrite exactly the same thing for the player, for the enemy, and for the gems. I don't like, even if I can do copy and paste, I don't like to rewrite exactly the same thing several times. So I take the benefit of the ES6 class and subclass, and I define a main class, which is character, and then have subclass with a few differences according to which object I want. And that's it. And that's it. That's no more complicated like that. The only thing which may be a bit more complicated is that I have wrapped the game in an object, in a class again, and in an object. This is just my point of view, more easy and more clear to write it, because like that I have no global variables and I have everything defined here. And to maintain the software, it's more easy because I know if it's something for the game, it's just there, I have to change. But you can do it without doing that, and having timer as a global variable, level as a global variable, and everything like that, and then using simple function instead of method of the class game. It will work exactly the same. And Corina, as I said, it's not that complicated. It's just ES6 and the class of ES6 instead of the objects as they are defined in the starter code. Take the time. I've provided you the GitHub of my project. Take the time to read quietly the code with the ES6 class lessons just beside, and you will see it's not complicated at all. Okay, Daniel, let me check. Let me check the starter code. I've downloaded it and I go back to it. Where it is. not in the right code. Give me 1 second. I just find back the file. Here it is. Okay. Well, enemy prototype is just the way to define a method of a class in ES5. In ES5, to define, you know, you have your enemy function with a capital letter like that, and this inside define it as an object and as a class enemy. Okay, and enemy.prototype says, the prototype say, I'm defining a prototype function update, which validity domain will be for the enemy class. Okay, then same for enemy prototype render. Then when I create a new enemy by having something like that, like let enemy equal new enemy, having prototyping a method, by this you create a new variable of the class enemy. So this variable, this object, will have all the property of the enemy. In the starter code, you have only one property, which is the sprite, and all the method of the enemy class. That's just a way to describe that this is a prototype. You are prototyping a method which will apply to all variable you declare then with the class enemy. That's it. In ES6, you do it differently. You do it like I did in my code. Let's go to a more simple. Well, here you are. In ES6, you do it more simply. Instead of the function of the character function, I define a class character. Okay. Then I add constructor. I can put default value for the parameters. The constructor will define all the properties of a character. And you define them by this.x, this.something. Something is the new property. And then to define the method, you don't use any more prototype. You just define a function, but as you see, you don't even use the function. The fact that this is inside the class thing, you just define a function like that, and it exactly the same. Right? You are this way. You are writing exactly the same thing as enemy.prototype.render. No, you can about what you are supposed to do. You can write it in ES5. It will be okay, and you will pass it if it's written in ES5. And you can also write it in ES6. I wrote mine with ES6, and I passed it. I encourage you to use the more as you can ES6, because later on in the nanodegree with React and everything, it's a lot more easy to use ES6, as ES6 use the class things instead of the functions instead of the function way to define the class and this kind of thing. But at the end, it's all the same thing. Everything is a function. The class is a function, so you can write it like that, or you can write it using class. And for the project, you do it just as you like. ES5 with prototype for the method and the function for the class, or you can write it with ES6. I encourage you to write it. You do it as you want, but I encourage you to try to write it with ES6, because two things: it's more easy to understand as object-oriented code, and in the remaining of the nanodegree with React and this kind of thing, it will be a lot more easy for you if you well understood the ES6 way of using classes. I agree, Daniel. Really, I agree. So if you start from scratch, you have to keep the engine file, of course. You have to keep the resources file, of course. You don't touch to that. You just keep them. And, you see, my file is called game.js. That's because I kept the app.js from the starter code in my folder, and started from scratch with a new file, and I gave it another name. But to be able to check what I was doing and everything, I kept the original file, the original app.js file. And in fact, my point of view is it's a bit a shame that Udacity, just after the ES6 lessons, provide a starter code in ES5. It's not logical at all. Just before the project, we learn how to use classes, subclasses, and everything in the ES6 lessons. And the first project we get just after that is written with ES5. I don't find that logical at all. And remember, it's not more. I think it's more readable with ES6. I define a class, so I put class, the name of my class. Don't forget to cap the first letter. That's the way that we define we define class in JavaScript. Then constructor for all the properties. You can set default value like I did for each property, and then to define your method, just a function and and what you do in the function. And as you see, the function can have parameters. You are allowed to pass parameters to the method. You just write them exactly like in a function. Yes, I agree. And well, as we just learned when I did the project, it was quite a while before now. I graduated beginning of May, so this project is far away from me now. But when I began this project, I thought, well, it's stupid. We just learned to use ES6. I want to practice with that, so I decided to write it in ES6 like I did. If you want to use, if you want to see how your project would look with ES5 once you have written it with ES6, it's very easy. You use Babel, and you can see the difference. Like I will show. Let me do something. I will show it to you. Okay. Okay. So let me change the screen I'm sharing. Okay. So you can go to Babel. You paste your code here. And then you click somewhere. You click somewhere, and where it is. And you click evaluate. No, I didn't do the right thing. I have errors. I should not have errors. Well, I don't remember, but you can go on Babel like that, and here normally you should get the I have an error. I don't know why. I shouldn't, because this code run. I don't know why I have an error, but normally you can you can easily let me check something. I will show it here. Here it is. Here it is. Because I've done it. Oh. No. This is what I did with Babel. And here you can see exactly the same code. You can check it on my GitHub. You have a second branch where I transpiled it into ES5, and here you have exactly the same code written in ES5. You see, it's done with game equal function and the prototype to define the methods. So this is exactly the same thing, but with ES5 instead of ES6. As you see, the transpiler has changed the let by var and the let and const by var and this kind of things. So everything has changed to be compatible with ES5. So you can use Babel to do that, and Babel will change the code, and you can. And on my GitHub, if you want to see the difference between the two codes, you can very easily. You go to the branch things, and as you see, I have two branches. Master, which is the S6 code, and here, which was done by conversion with Babel in ES5 code. Oh, hi, Lina. It's very easy. This is an easy part. Oh, let me show you how to do that. So it is when you handle the move of the player. Okay? This is what I did, Lina, to manage that my player don't move out of the Canva. So when you get a key, when you get to the move key, so the up, down, left, and right arrow. So if I get a up arrow, I make a test, and if my X position of my player is less than -15, after the first thing I do is I subtract the first thing I do is I subtract the position, the size of the move to my X position. No, I don't subtract it. If X minus 53 is inferior at minus 15, it means that I have reached the river and I am over the river, so I have won the game. Okay? If I get, so here this boundary is a bit different. It's a boundary where you win. Here is if I go down, if I move my player down, so I add 53 to the X position of my player, and if it's less or equal than 400, then I have not reached the boundary, and I actually add 53 to the Y position of the player. Otherwise, this false is just because I do nothing. This is, I don't know if you are familiar with this way of ternary test. This is equivalent as, I can write it. This is exactly equivalent as if okay, this is the exact equivalent. So I check that if I add 83, it becomes less or equal than 400. If it's true, then I have not reached the boundary, the bottom boundary, so I add 53. Otherwise, I do just nothing. And then I do exactly the thing with the same thing with the left boundary. I subtract 100, and if it's more than 5, then I do the move, otherwise I do nothing. And exactly the same for right. And like that, you won't go outside of the canvas. As you see, it's very simple. When you try to move, you check before, then you are not reaching a boundary. If you are not reaching a boundary, you do the move, otherwise you do nothing. Did you get it? Did you understood, Lina? Or do you need more explanation? Any questions? Any questions, anyone? Still 1 hour and a half left, so I have plenty of time to explain you other things if you need. Do not hesitate. Really, any kind of question about the project, and I will do my best to explain you. Oh, hi, Valer. Hi again. I didn't write it. I didn't write it in the. Sorry, I didn't write it in the HTML. I use the Canva to write the to display the pop-up. Let me show it to you. Let me share the code again. I was a bit away because I was doing a review. Okay, so it's not there. This is the review. Okay, so my pop-up is there. Let me... here it is. I use the Canva to display the pop-up. You well, it's an easy way. It's an easy way to do it, but it will take you a bit of time because you will need to learn how to use the Canva more precisely. But here it is. My pop-up is there. You see, I use the setAX object just like the game, just like the character of the game and everything, to display my pop-up. Here I define fill style. Fill style will define the color and the transparency of my pop-up. So I use 000, it's a black color, and 0.7 transparency. So my pop-up will be a dark gray transparent thing. This is the color I will use to fill the object I draw after that. Okay. Then I draw a rectangle, fill a rectangle. I draw a rectangle which is filled with the color I defined here. This is the and this is the size of my rectangle. This is the upper left corner and the bottom right corner of the rectangle. So this will draw on the Canva a rectangle. So this will draw on it, not erasing everything. So the game is behind, and you will have a rectangle, a dark gray transparent rectangle, a bit more small than the Canva of the game. Then I define a new color. It will be white because I will on my dark gray pop-up I will write in white. I define my font. I will use Arial, and so the size of the font and the font I will use. I want my text to be aligned from the center, so it will align it exactly in the middle of the string of character. And then I will write the title and the text. The title and the text I need are defined earlier. Here they are. All states, game post, and so on. And this is how I display my pop-up. As you see, it's fairly easy. Just you have to learn how to use the so you see I use a 30x pixel size font for the title and 25 pixel for the text under the title. As you see, it's very, very easy, very short. You just need to know a bit how to learn the Canva. It's not very complicated, really not very complicated. The logic of using the Canva is you decide how to, and then here you see I had an emoji on the pop-up, and to use an emoji, so I choose the emoji in switching on the state of my game, and I call somewhere draw image to display any images. So here it's to display the sprite, but where it is, you use then draw image to display the emoji. But to be able to do that, you need to add the emoji I use in the engine, as I showed you earlier, in the engine where all the resources are to preload the image of my emoji. And here are my emojis: happy, sad, and wait. That's why you don't see anything in the HTML, just because I don't use the HTML to display the pop-up. I display it with the Canva. It might sound a bit complicated, but I can tell you it's not complicated at all. But as I was some kind of in advance when I was doing the project, I took the time to learn how to use the Canva as well. That's why I did that like that. Well, the Canva is there anyway because of the game, so why not to use it? But you know, if you want to write your game quickly, don't worry. You don't need to do that. A simple alert message as the player has win will allow you to pass the project. The only requirement is that something must happen. Yeah, I think I can provide you the link very quickly, because on my home page of Udacity, I should have it. Let me check. Yes, here it is. Here is the course about Canva.
In this lesson.
There is only one lesson. I think it's you can take it in I don't remember how long it was, but no more than 2 hours. Anyone has any other question? Hi, Karam. Very quietly, Karam. The jam is very, very quiet. Not many people, and up to now, I have answered to all questions. I'm waiting for some new questions. So, still an hour to go. Any question? Any other more question? Do not hesitate. You have someone just for you, just to answer to your question. So, any question related to the project will be fine. So, no more questions? Sure? Nobody? Okay, if there is no more question, I will stay on Slack, but I think I will close the live show, the live stream for the moment. And if someone comes with a question, you can ask it on Slack. Either I will answer on Slack, either I will restart the live stream if needed. Okay then, so as I said, I close the live stream and I stay on Slack until 7 o'clock. If you have any question, ask it on Slack. I will answer either Slack, either if it's needed, I will restart the live stream. Okay?